All right. Hello, everybody. My name's Ryan Boyles. We're back again with another live video chat from IBM looking at big data and analytics. This week we're going to talk about one of the big theme topics for the IBM Insight Conference coming up in terms of applying insight everywhere. And specifically, today we want to talk about the Internet of Things. But before we get underway, I want to introduce myself. I'm Ryan Boyles. I am a social media strategist in the digital marketing for our events at IBM. And I also want to kick it over and give a shout out to my colleague, my department member, my partner in crime, Ted Conroy. Hey, Ted.
What's going on, Ryan?
So tell us a little bit about what you do with all this crazy planning that we do for events like Insight.
Well, that's what I was hoping you were going to help me figure out, is what exactly it is that I do. So I work on Ryan's team, and we help plan just about everything that goes on from a digital perspective for a conference. So basically my job and Ryan's job is to make people like Zach, who we've got on the line today, look really, really good when they have their conferences. So I'll leave it to that. And I'm really excited to hear, about the meat and potatoes of what this IoT analytics team does.
Yeah, and I want to say that this is the second in a long series of video chats that we're going to be doing throughout the summer. And just to give everybody an idea of what we have in store for you, we want you to come back every couple of weeks and be a part of these chats. And they're going to become more interactive in nature, of course. We're going to have more panelists. But the idea here is to not only have sort of, technical discussions around the topics that interest, data scientists or IT managers or application developers or security experts. We're also going to talk about some of the logistics and, enablement that is an opportunity for Ted and I, other folks on the event team, to talk about navigating, the world's biggest big data conference that's going to be held in October. So we'll give you a lot more insight, if you will, into the conference and what's going to happen there and how you can get the most out of your experience. But that's enough of that. I want to introduce our guest for today. He's one of my buddies, and we've worked together on a number of projects in the past. But now he has an exciting new role, and so we thought it would be a great opportunity to bring him on the show. So welcome, Zach.
Hey, so thanks, guys, and you guys are good at making me look good. There's no doubt about it. So I am focused on IoT now. I'm the beat lead for IoT, which means I'm doing the content marketing and the social for IoT, all things IoT, and then a big industry focus for us. So we're focused on industry verticals such as auto, A&D, oil and gas, electronics, industrial products, the IIoT bit of IoT that is kind of our sweet spot at IBM.
Cool. Well, that this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, so I was a little bit, not only wanting to get you on the show to catch up about this topic, but, me in my previous role within the marketing organization, when you and I were department members, Internet of Things was like my bread and butter for the last calendar year. So when you look at our previous conferences that we've held, like Pulse, where we talk about cloud impact, when we talked about mobile, and even Innovate, when we talked about the developer experience. The big common thread was Internet of Things. It was really, coming into the forefront for developers and for IT managers and for chief, security officers and data scientists. So I noticed last year, 2014 for IBM, we were really coming into our own with platforms like Bluemix, and with bringing a development environment, a deployment environment, a secure deployment environment. All these things were coming together under Bluemix, and with a lot of the technology like Maximo to manage devices and policies for Internet of Things. So I'm really passionate about this, and I'm excited about what we're gonna cover today. So without belaboring that so much, we're going to talk a little bit about sort of what we think is hot in the marketplace right now. And I wanted to bring it first to discuss a meetup that I went to here in Raleigh, North Carolina last night. We have a local meetup for Internet of Things here in the Triangle that started about a year ago, called the Raleigh Internet of Things Meetup. If you're local, I highly encourage you to get involved with this. It's grown from like a 30-person, garage thing into a crazy workshop, full-day workshop event that took place yesterday, and then it culminated in a discussion review last night with 350 people in attendance.
I'm sure that Riot is just a total coincidence, right?
Well, you know what? I love the name, but you know me, I'm always thinking about how is something hashtagable. And if you look at Twitter and look for the word Riot, you're not going to find much about Internet of Things. You're going to find some crazy stuff. But the intention is to build this community, and what I'm discovering is there's so many different players at every level of Internet of Things, whether it's from the edge of the cloud, where the device lives, whether it's your Fitbit and wearable on your arm, all the way through the network, the carrier, the data collection systems, all the stuff that IBM deals with. There's lots of players in this space, both large and small. And so the workshops for this meetup, I thought, would be interesting for us to sort of take a couple of those talking points and sort of dive into them as a point of reference. So they talked a lot about what are the challenges for adoption and what are North Carolina companies doing to address those. And I would argue IBM has such a huge presence here in the Research Triangle Park that we really have a lot to add to that conversation. So one of the challenges, Zach, that they really talked a lot about was standards. And so I just wanted to get sort of what are your top of line thoughts on standards in this space?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, and one that's incredibly pertinent to IoT and to us daily. The way I've heard it, I was at IoT World a few weeks ago, and there was a conversation, a panel on standards actually, and it was fascinating. What one of the speakers said is the Uber connected home is in the near future, right? So soon your garage door opener, your refrigerator, your TV, your stove are all going to be operated with an app. And so if you have 25 things in your home that are connected devices, are you really going to ever bother to run 25 different apps to manage all those things? And you're not. You're going to see those in a single pane of glass, one app, and the only way that ever happens is with standards, right? A way that those all can be managed through one single platform. And we're aware of that, and it's huge. This is kind of a personal example of how it would affect somebody on a day-to-day life, but then it's huge for industries too as well. So we're big believers in that. IBM is taking part in a lot of open standards committees and organizations. We're a founder of the Industrial Internet Consortium. We're one of the founding members among many others. As we have been for cloud, we believe big time in being open and making it so there can be a single platform that makes sense for people to operate. We think we have some pretty good solutions, but we want people to have choice, and we want there to be some flexibility, and then we want there to be a way for people to manage it that is the same across all platforms.
Zach, that's a really interesting point, because just from a micro level, I do triathlons, I run, and it's interesting that on a very small scale, a lot of these devices have been at the forefront of IoT before IoT was IoT. So heart rate monitors, GPS trackers, cadence sensors that go on your bike, along with power meters. And there was always kind of a big riff over what exactly was the standard. You'd see Polar, which was one company, come out with their own proprietary signal, and then Garmin would come out with another. So you'd end up running 4 devices to get, 3 different measurements.
Mm-hmm.
And we've started to see kind of a bifurcation between 2 on, ANT plus and Bluetooth low energy, which has really kind of come through across the spectrum, across a variety of different devices, and has really captured the market. So if I could just ask, when you talk about standards, do you let the market set that, or do you try to evaluate on your own and realize what works best for the solutions that you're providing, or is it a mixture of both, what the market likes and then what can work best in terms of, especially a conversation that we wanted to get to next, security of this transmitted data?
Yeah, so another good question, and it is absolutely both, right? Because if you don't give the market something they want to use, they're not going to use it. You're not going to have any success with it. So of course that has to be top of mind. And I should say when these ideas are getting developed, of course it's not us. It is a lot of smart people, a lot of companies that are working hard on IoT stuff, and understand how these things are going to work and have a long-term plan from kind of engineering the sensor or the device to the operation once it's out there to gathering the data, right? So obviously these consortiums, these organizations around open standards are going to have a lot of input and can kind of see the entire life cycle from the device, like I said, from engineering to operating to engagement. So definitely we have, suggestions, ideas, things to say. Well, I think maybe guidelines would be the best way to put it around how this stuff ought to work, but definitely you have to take the market into consideration when you're developing this stuff, or it'll never get picked up if you don't put something out that the market wants.
Cool. But you know what? This other topic was really hot as well around, gee whiz, you have all this data. And it seems obvious, I think, to us, but there was a big discussion in these work groups at the Riot meetup around how do you sort of cope with getting the right bits of data. How do you navigate these data lakes that you're building? And to use that analogy, how do you swim through it? How do you dive through it? How do you sort of throw the the pails of bits out of the boat when you don't need them? Big focus on not just collecting data and being secure about it, but how do you find the right bits of information so that you can not only use it for insights, but sort of reshare it maybe with your partners, so that there's a relationship, a sort of integration between maybe your wearable device and your app that the consumer would use, or maybe the fleet example where you have a device in a vehicle where it needs to interact not only with home base but also with other sensors, maybe on the vehicle or with the app that the driver is using, things like that. So, can you talk anything about the analytics question around Internet of Things?
Sure. So, IoT is all about the data, right? That's why we want to connect all this stuff so we can get the data. We can do predictive analytics. We can get insights that are going to, do things like cause less downtime, help us to operate more efficiently, and make more money. So, the new IoT division that was announced at IBM in April is actually under the analytics organization in IBM. And it sits there for a reason, and it's because we believe that IoT, the monetization of IoT, right, the real value, how you're actually going to drive business results and make money with IoT is based on the big data you get out of IoT, and then using analytics to glean insights from those from that data. So it's interesting. They're doing a lot of studies, and you read a lot of stats about this lately. And one I read recently was that 90% of IoT data is never analyzed. It comes in and it's never touched. And the interesting thing is a lot of data from IoT is, it's kind of real-time data. And once this stuff is 10 seconds old, it's not worth anything anymore. So A, you have to be able to capture that data and analyze it, but B, you have to be able to do it very quickly in a lot of circumstances. I think there's some really good examples, right? So you look at something like a rotational asset. It could be a drill rig. It could be a jet engine. And all those things have sensors on them now, and it saves a ton of money because you don't have unplanned downtime, right? You can fix these problems before something happens, and it saves downtime. It saves a lot of money, right? And it allows constant operation other than the shorter bit of downtime which can be planned, and that saves a ton of money for an oil company or an airline company. And the only way you can do that is with predictive analytics based on those sensors that are all connected as part of that IoT landscape.
Yeah, so when I look at that moving forward, the real value prop here is both real-time being able to see what's going on, but also collecting, and what you're saying, 10 seconds after that data's kind of brought in, it's useless. IBM's value prop is going to be, no, we're going to hold on to that, and branching off of that, we can find patterns over the course of a long period of data, and then kind of meld that and kind of work into the predictive analytics space. So could you talk a little bit about that, about kind of that next step? Because I think that's kind of where you're going on this, is because you can get short-term trends and know exactly when something's going to break, but like you said, be able to put this all for a drill rig on a maintenance cycle and know exactly when you need to do this.
Yeah, sure. So, analytics is something IBM's been doing for a long time. It is something that we have a lot of expertise, a lot of really good technology around. And, I think our belief at IoT is another way to gather data, as I've said, and there's a ton of data out there. And so, the next step is how do you actually figure out what that data is telling you that can help you make more money? I mean, in essence, that's what you're after, right? So there's a lot of different examples, and we have actually a lot of case studies on things that IBM clients are already doing. The drill rig one is a great one. The jet engine is a great one. And these are kind of money-making opportunities. Another interesting bit is safety opportunities, which is a big one. And I'm thinking of this because IBM recently made a big announcement of a partnership with the Weather Channel, or the Weather Company, and they are the Weather Channel owners that we have. And it's using IoT devices and sensors to capture weather data and then analyze that weather data to make sure if a city needs to send a warning out to its citizens because there's a big storm coming, something like that, you can do that, and that's on top of things like keeping fleets running on time when there's inclement weather. It's really interesting all the things you can do, because there is the economic value of IoT, which is huge. Then there's also the social and the economic, or sorry, I already said economic, the social and the safety value of IoT, which is something that we're trying to tap into as well and provide to a lot of clients we're working with.
I'm going to throw out a phrase here. With great data comes great responsibility.
Absolutely. Yep.
So this really reminds me of another thing where one of the huge themes of Insight last year that really resonated a lot was talking about the, I think, 4 V's of big data, right? And so when we were talking about, veracity and velocity and all those aspects of how do you deal with large sets of data, and make sense of it, it really resonates as, Internet of Things is not a replacement for big data. It's sort of the ultimate use case of it, So when you think about big data and making sense of making the best use and multiple uses of this data set that is ever growing, ever changing, and is time-based, it seems like that velocity, quote unquote, having fast data, where you're doing something, you're maybe not using it just to react in the moment in real time, which is valuable, but you're doing these predictions and building sort of a model, a decision engine even for how you deal with things. It's really, to me, that's like, it's really just, it's mind-blowing, because it's gonna create so many new sort of applications where we've had all this data and we really have not known what to do with it. And so I think that when we look at current events and bring this back to security, when we look at like the latest, literally the news yesterday of the data breach of the U.S. government, we've had lots of consumer-based data breaches that have made a lot of sensational headlines, and all those corporations sort of assure us that it's minimized or it's or we can deal with it. But I think one of the commentators, for example, on CNN last night, really said that you can't stop the breaches. You have to address them in a timely fashion. And so that brings it back to this question of data, where how do you manage this data, and where does security play a part? Because you're not going to prevent every sort of breach, but you have to have security policies that are physical and digital so that you can deal with it when it does happen.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, and it's a really big concern. I think it's top of mind for anybody who's working on IoT security because it's tough. You have to have secure software. You have to secure the software running on the device. You have to physically secure the device or the sensor itself. Once you get that data and you bring it back to the cloud, you have to make sure the cloud where that data is secure. There are a lot of different security aspects to it, and it's tough, right? A lot of the IoT data comes from things like mobile devices, right? How do you secure that mobile device? And there are many different things that you have to work to make sure are safe. And it's a big issue because it's really, it's really an issue to all of us, right? Because as these things kind of come more and more connected, and M2M's been around for a long time, and wearables for a bit now, but this really hyper-connected world where everything is connected. Things have to be able to run securely independent of each other, right? So if you hack one thing, there needs to be a wall that makes it so you don't have access to the other. And that I think seems to be one of the main challenges of IoT security. There's a lot of smart minds working on it. I think that most companies that are working on it, I know IBM for sure, is thinking about security from the engineering, the creation of the device, to the operation of the device out in the wild, to kind of the engagement where you take that data and you pull it back in and are working on using that data for insights.
Yeah, and Zach, I know this has been an area where we've heard a lot of, fictional sci-fi where, in the world of IoT, somebody could, take control of airplanes in midair or whatnot. I mean, this was a 24 subplot in season 8 that we're talking about. But we've hit a point where this could actually be done. A guy by the name of Chris Roberts on a flight from Denver through Chicago to Syracuse started tweeting about how, he was saying, oh, should we deploy the oxygen masks this time? Should we bank right? What should we do? This is a guy who has been saying for years that our cybersecurity standards are too low and has been trying to drive a charge on it. And it looks like this is a guy who finally just got fed up. And it's almost one of those superhero situations. Not to put this guy Chris Roberts, who was taken in by the FBI, on a pedestal, but in a situation where we had somebody who wants to do this for good, but to show how he wants to do good, he did a little bad. And he said in subsequent interviews that, I've banked a plane, I've taken the controls, I've been able to do all of this just via my seat on the flight and the in-flight entertainment system. So it's really odd that we now live in a world where IoT security isn't a theoretical practice issue. It's a real-world application problem that we have.
Yeah, and it's scary. I wish it was still just a 24 episode. Things like that make me not want to hop on a plane again. But it's a reality, right? And I think we all know this kind of thing is a reality now. This is an example where it's really tough because I think IoT devices that are being manufactured now, these kinds of security concerns are thought of and kind of built into the device, right? Something that was built years ago, I think often those things have to be brought back in and re-engineered to, install appropriate security measures to deal with this kind of world of hyper-connectivity now, where you can do something to me, I think 10 years ago almost seems unfathomable to, access an in-flight entertainment system and be able to take control of a plane. So yeah, I think there's a lot of security concerns that are arising that people had never thought of and will continue to as the world becomes more and more connected. And it'll be interesting to see how a lot of that stuff is dealt with. There are some IoT security councils kind of popping up now because I think the there's a huge opportunity with IoT, obviously, but there are also some really big challenges.
And these pipes aren't getting any smaller. I mean, Chris O'Connor wrote a blog that I know that there's some consultation involved there, and I know you're kind of on that team. That said the amount of just sheer devices connected are only going to increase by 2020. I mean, we're talking hundreds of percentage increase, doubling, tripling, quadrupling itself over the next 4 years. And it's just insane to think, about how much we have to keep up.
Absolutely. I think it's something in the tens of billions of connected devices by 2020. And, the question on my mind is, how do you even keep up with that? How do you even make sure you don't miss problems?
Absolutely.
It'll be interesting to see.
That really, it brings back one of the examples that the speaker from Verizon said last night was that they're obviously very much in the device or really the carrier business or they started off years ago in the M2M space primarily, and now they do partnerships on different levels of this layer cake, of this platform layer cake for Internet of Things. But they said that in 2008, I think they were predicting that connected devices would go from like 33 million up to like 100 million. And so their prediction, they were terrified of that growth curve. And now that we're talking about 65 billion, it's beyond an order of magnitude bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that really I think we have to really look at is there's a level of trust that is still needed when it comes to adoption, and both in the enterprise space and in the consumer space. One of the other great metaphors that was used last night, when we talk about connected cars, there's a lot, that's a hot topic, obviously. There's a lot of companies looking at this, both auto companies and just pure technology companies. And one of the analogies that was put forward last night was that think about the way that they described it as the elevator conundrum. Back in the day when elevators as a technology were introduced, people were very skeptical of the function of those. People didn't want to be trapped in a metal box that was going to break down and they die, or you know what I mean? Like, it was a very untested technology. There were no standards. It was just a metal box on some cables. And so the way that they addressed that was that you used to have an operator. So a person literally would be the person to assure you that you're going to the right place, that you're going to get there safely, that we're going to do it with a smile, and we're going to operate the machinery for you so that you can trust that it's going to work.
It's kind of like what New Jersey does with gas today. Still.
Yeah. So I mean, gas stations had this model, this business model, and so in a lot of ways, that's where we are with things like self-driving cars. Is that eventually the elevator problem, people became confident that they could just go in it by themselves and they could just push a button and it would do the right thing. So the level, and now my children, for example, they don't even know how an elevator works, but they just know it takes them places, right? And the same way that a mobile device works by communicating with the cloud and bringing you information. So there are issues like that we have to deal with, and I think this is a good way for us to sort of transition to talk about the monetization issue, because there are areas within Internet of Things that are maybe low margin in terms of the business model, or even with something like the carrier model, right? When you talk about standards, when you talk about the communication between these devices and with the cloud environment or the intelligent layer, the curve of like cell transmissions, the adoption rate is going down. And so Verizon knows that that's their bread and butter, so they have to invest in other areas. So we have to look at where are the areas of growth here? Where are the opportunities? Where is the innovation? Where does the innovation need to take place? Not just to make it work, but to make it feasible for the enterprise. So can you talk more about the monetization aspect of Internet of Things?
Yeah, so that's a big question on everyone's mind, I think. There's a lot of promise behind IoT right now. and there's a lot of seemingly neat applications, right? But the bottom line is, how's IoT going to drive the bottom line? And I think that, you know, the biggest challenge is, I think the opportunity, as I've said, with IoT is in the data, right, that you get. And there's a ton of data, right? I said earlier 90% of that goes unanalyzed. So there's a lot more noise than there is signal. And a lot of that data is not stuff you need. It's not stuff you want. So one of the big challenges is figuring out what is the useful data, what is the data you need to analyze. And often, you know, what that data is the outlier, right? So if you have a sensor on a train track, and it's gathering data every time a train passes by, right? Most of that data should be all the same, and you don't care about it. What you want is those outliers, because those are the kind of things that will indicate a problem, so you can, you know, catch that before something actually happens. You know, do those predictive analytics on it. You know, I think there are a lot of good instances that we've heard talk about that we haven't seen happen yet, but I think we're getting there very quickly. You know, I think that we're gathering this data. It's getting overwhelming. We've been saying this for years. There's more data than we know what to do with. IoT, the connected devices, and IoT are only increasing the amount of data we're getting. In the way you know, make a profit using IoT is to figure out what data is getting gathered that you can analyze to take real actionable insights on. So do things like predictive maintenance, do things like you know, deal with the weather, and that saves a lot of downtime. It allows continuous operations, and it helps the bottom line.
Yeah, that opens up an interesting opportunity when you talk about the amount of data and being able to pipe this in, and what we talked about a little earlier. This is where the opportunity for partnerships with large companies that have large sets of data that don't know what to do with it come in. On just a pure data side, not IoT related, you know, Twitter and Facebook specifically come to mind when I think about our ability to really be the engine of somebody's kind of, you know, data and be their big processor. Is that something you see as kind of a business model, you know, kind of value prop for IBM moving forward with IoT? You know, connect your devices, and we will be that engine for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that's a huge opportunity. And it's interesting you bring up the Twitter aspect. I've been talking about a lot of kind of industrial examples, but there's even, I mean, just as big opportunities when you look at Twitter, all the data that you can gather to use for marketing and sales, those kinds of things. I think there's a huge opportunity there. And I think there's a lot of noise there, and you have to figure out how to kind of decipher that noise for the signal to get there. But that's one of the things I think that you know, many companies, including IBM, really have a good play in analytics, which is the key to making that data work and making money off it.
I was thinking of a cool example of this, and I'm kind of ripping off one of the speakers last night, but they brought up an interesting point that I've been thinking a lot about, and this is sort of bringing it back to our fitness challenge, Ted. When you think about like wearing your Fitbit, it gives you data that kind of shows you your behavior. You know, it's tracking your movements, and you're supposed to infer fitness, you know, changes or benefits from that. But a lot of that is left up to the imagination of the user to interpret based on graphs. And so one of the examples that was talked about last night at the Riot meetup was, how do you take something like a Fitbit and go across verticals? You know, how do you take, and this is still a consumer example, but how do you like marry the data set from Fitbit with the Samsung refrigerator so that when you've implemented a fitness policy, you could literally say that, you know, I have not just a goal, but I want you to learn about my behavior, that I like to snack at night. So at 8 p.m., the, you know, refrigerator becomes the internet connected refrigerator with the video screen becomes a no-fly zone that helps become a sort of like a you know, a Jarvis talking, you know, fitness partner for you that helps you, you know, not just track your behavior, but helps you guide your behavior. So there's opportunity there where there are applications that just, they aren't just things that show you notifications on your phone, they help you with your daily routine. And I think that's a big opportunity where with these partnerships, you could have sharing of data that is beneficial for multiple parts of a person's daily life. And it actually does more than just save that company the bottom line on its maintenance of a refrigerator. It helps the consumer use the refrigerator more, more in line with their life goals.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's one of the main tenets of IoT is all the things are talking to the other things, right? The interconnectivity between the things is a key to making the IoT work, and then also, you don't want data to be siloed, right? So you provided a really good example. If you have that Fitbit data that says you like to snack at night, it's not really useful unless it can communicate to the other device like the fridge, and then it can lock you out after 8 p.m. every night.
I need
you
that
probably won't
right
like.
now.
But it'll be good for you, I suppose.
Cool. Well, you know what? I think we could talk about this for hours and have our own full-day workshop. But we want to keep these video chats relatively short and sweet here. And I just wanted to sort of bring it home with one final thought. With each of these video chats where we talk about insight, where we talk about data, when we talk about analytics, we're definitely going to talk more about Internet of Things. We want to wrap with a thought around how to navigate a conference like Insight with something related to the subject matter. So I have the perfect one to sort of kick off this series. One of the big discussions also with Internet of Things is the energy. How do you power these devices? How do you, in the consumer space, it's a big concern, right? Everybody's, there's actually a disorder now where you are, your anxiety level is driven by your battery meter on your phone, right?
Absolutely.
So with Internet of Things, this is exacerbated even further. And so when you go to a conference, when you travel, when you're on the road, when you're in a hotel, when you're at a conference like Insight that's multiple days, your battery life of all of your devices, whether it's your wearables or your mobile device, you're probably using those things kind of in overdrive mode, and battery power is a real concern. So my tip is that you really do have to bring, I've got something like 4 Mofis that I carry around with me. I know other people use, rechargeable stations that are sort of woven into your purse, or they're built into your backpack. There's lots of innovative solutions for carrying around, I guess, extra batteries. But I think Internet of Things research is probably going to help a great deal out of necessity, because some of these wearables are throwaway devices, but many devices like your mobile phone is something that you really need a better solution for. And I think there are people like the Assist Center at NC State that's doing research into how do you charge your device, based on your body's movement rather than a battery. So I think that while we're waiting on that, my advice is just that you really have to sort of plan ahead with carrying batteries for your personal needs when you're at a tech conference like IBM Insight.
Or go find Ryan if you forget.
Yeah, I know. I'm a walking charger. I'm your best friend. So I want to thank you, Zach. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know we haven't seen the last of you. We'll have you back on the show. Come back anytime. We want to also thank our intrepid co-host, Mr. Ted Conroy, coming to you live from New York. I'm coming to you live from Wake Forest, North Carolina. Zach, I believe you're in Colorado.
Beautiful Colorado.
Man, oh man. So we're all excited to talk about these topics. It's obvious. There's a lot more to talk about coming up. I would encourage everybody to go follow not only us on social media, and I'll give a shout out to both at Jory, at Ted Conroy, and at the Rab. That is our 3 Twitter handles. But also check out the IBM Insight Twitter handle and the IBM Insight website that talks a lot more about every subject related to data and analytics for the conference. So check out ibm.com/insight, and you're going to start to see not only the curriculum that you can learn a great deal from, but we're going to have lots more opportunities for you to see previews, whether it's video chats like these or thought leadership pieces. So thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you in 2 weeks to talk more about data and analytics.